This is the worst episode of Jujutsu Kaisen according to a growing voice on social media, and the community that is saying this will actually surprise you. It is the Japanese community that is very upset with this episode of JJK, calling it one of the worst episodes of the series to date, saying the narrative was all over the place, the character depiction was all over the place, the music choice was bad, the actual adaptation from the manga to anime was horrible, and Studio MAPPA is more or less a very bad animation studio. I've seen it all today. However, if you're in the English-speaking community and you've been discussing the episode today only with the English-speaking community, then this information will actually surprise you, because there has been next to nothing but praise for the episode of JJK today. Everybody, at least in the English-speaking community, is hailing it as one of the best episodes of the series to date. And when I saw all this discussion on social media when I woke up, I was like, okay, what's going on here? Because I haven't seen a divide between the Japanese community and the English-speaking community since Chainsaw Man, which is ironic because Chainsaw Man was also done by Studio MAPPA, and it's also ironic that just a day ago, MAPPA and NETFLIX made a partnership deal to where MAPPA went out of their way. The president of MAPPA said that they wanted to focus on global appeal and modern audiences. So, in a way, we already see a glimpse of what MAPPA is trying to do, or cater to a certain demographic, or global audiences in this case, instead of the actual Japanese fan base. But more or less, if that was an accident or not, I have not seen a divide between discussions of an episode since then. And so when I went out of my way to sit down and watch this episode, I was like, okay, I want to understand why there's so much praise for this episode, but also why there's so much negativity from the Japanese community. And I watched the episode, and my overall thoughts on it, it's great. Now, I will say, I don't think this episode is the best episode of the series, and I also don't think it's one of the worst episodes of the series. I feel like it's somewhere down the middle, and let me explain. At first glance, in a vacuum, if I look at this episode for what it is, without any context from the manga or anything like that, I think straight up that animation-wise, experimental animation art-wise, it is an absolutely gorgeous episode. And this entire sequence, by the way, is in reference to Kill Bill. If you have ever watched the movie Kill Bill, then you know for a fact that this looks exactly like it, and the person that probably storyboarded this, directed this, and put this in was definitely trying to do a homage to, you know, Kill Bill. Because Kill Bill had, obviously, Japanese themes within it, and having an entire sequence like this with, you know, Maki letting loose and going crazy makes a lot of sense with a Kill Bill type aesthetic and vibe. So I do like this type of stuff. It showcases the influence of a very old movie that has stood the test of time to this very day, and I feel like more or less the person that worked on this and animated this definitely deserves a lot of praise. However, I do think, though, whoever was storyboarding this episode and making the final decisions definitely sacrificed the narrative, or in this case, the themes of the manga and character development, just to make everything look like a spectacle or flashy. So let me explain. So, this episode in general, if you take a hard look at the art and animation, it looks gorgeous. Like, I have really next to no complaints. Obviously, some might say it looks very simplistic because of the color palette and the black and white and the red and everything. And obviously, the art looks more simplistic to make things look better in motion. You could definitely probably complain about that if you really want to get into the nitpicking, nitty-gritty of the art and animation, but the point of the matter, I think it's unanimous that the art direction and animation for the episode is pretty good. But I think that in this case, we're seeing a rare glimpse of the sacrifice for this type of art and animation, that the story, the sound effects, the sound design, the voice acting, and everything else that isn't art animation was sacrificed to make this episode look good. And let's get into one key detail that I see a lot of people talking about, and that is the actual music choice for this episode, which is actually a problem I personally have while I was watching this episode. I think that in general, the music choice for this episode is pretty freaking bad. Now, there is some moments where the music is fine, but the music in this segment is honestly not good, and especially in this Kill Bill reference-like sequence as well, I don't think the music is good as well. It does not fit the tone and vibe of what the series is trying to convey to the audience. It's in fact kind of doing the opposite. It's making it look very uplifting and happy, when in reality, this is anything but a happy moment. It might feel like nice to see Maki getting vengeance for what happened to her and her sister, but it is not a happy moment. If you have read the manga, then you will know that, Gege Akutami, when he was writing this, there was a depiction about this showcasing just how tragic and depressing it was. That for Maki to reach this level of power, to be able to do something like this, she had to basically, one of the sisters, one of the twins, had to die. And in this case, Mai died for Maki could flourish and bloom into a beautiful flower. And it's very sad, because she was only able to achieve something like this because her sister had to die. It's very tragic. It fits the core essence of what JJK is about, and curses and everything, vengeance. It's a really great theme and vibe. And so when you look at this scene in the manga, it is a very depressing sequence, because as much as it's cool to see Maki letting loose, going crazy, getting rid of the entire clan that's done her wrong and her family wrong, it is just nothing but sadness. This is not a scene that should invoke happiness in you, and it should invoke nothing but just depression, honestly. And I feel like the music really clashes with the theme and does not make this scene what it should actually be. There's nothing wrong with the art and animation looking flashy like this, but the music definitely did not help this sequence in any way, and I feel like whoever designed that, they kind of wanted to do an inspiration from Kill Bill instead of actually focusing on what this scene was supposed to mean, which gets into what I discussed earlier, that the person that was storyboarding this episode, they clearly wanted to go all in on the Kill Bill type stuff. They wanted to really reference that, which is completely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a reason why, for instance, the Akira slide is still referenced to this day. There's very impactful moments that happen within animation, art, or different movies and stuff that are referenced throughout years upon years, decades even, because of just how good it is and how much it impacts the genre or media. But I feel like they allowed Kill Bill's very tone and vibe not just to dictate the art and animation, but to dictate this entire episode and absolutely demolish the narrative of Maki and Mai's relationship. And I feel like that's the reason why the Japanese community, more or less, is actually very upset with this episode. Because if you look at a lot of their complaints, more or less, it boils down to the music choice, to the difference in the manga, for instance, not really getting the emotional weight, for instance, like Toji coming in, and how it was very creepy, scary, and honestly, it was just like, it made you like, holy crap, this man is insane. But in the episode, Toji's like very blurred, it's very quick, the pacing is very fast-paced, it feels like it's all over the place, which that gets into the next part with the art animation completely out of tune with the episode. So yeah, the episode is a spectacle. It looks incredible. Like I said, I'm not putting the spectacle down, but I feel like because of how fast-paced the spectacle is, how gorgeous it looks, there's not enough time to breathe. There's not enough time to really understand the weight of what this scene actually means with what Maki is doing here against this clan, and how wronged her sister and her were, and what her parents did to them as well. There's not enough time to really breathe and understand the emotional weight of this scene. And yes, there is brief moments, but it's so quick, so fast-paced, that you go to one scene to the next, and it's already in a break speed action sequence, and you're like, holy crap, and you're just not able to really appreciate the emotional weight of this. And more or less, I do want to admit that in the manga, this was only 5 chapters long. And so it was already a very rushed or fast-paced arc, but it was done in a nice way. I feel like there was really not a lot of complaints about this in the manga. Maybe there was a few, but not too much, so to speak. But in the anime, adapting 5 chapters an episode is not a problem. The problem is that there could have been breathing room. They could have made this episode maybe even 2 episodes and allowed more emotional weight to Maki obtaining this ability and pretty much becoming the next Toji. And so I don't know, I feel like, yeah, I understand the Japanese complaints here, that the animation art was the main focus, and everything else was more or less thrown to the wayside, and not really as important at all to this episode. And I do think that some of the complaints might be a little bit overblown, but I think in general, I understand it. I really do. Now, I do understand that music choice-wise, that is very subjective. There's going to be people that completely disagree with me for the music choice, like not liking the music choice for this episode. People are going to say it fits perfectly, it's completely fine because it's supposed to be uplifting for Maki and all that, and that's completely fine. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments below. But I feel like the tone of this episode, in my personal opinion, is just so at odds with the music, the art and animation, and even the voice acting. It doesn't feel like it was made correctly. It's like all the ingredients are here to make a 10 out of 10 gourmet meal, but it turned out to be maybe a 7 or 8 out of 10, which it had no business being. It should have been a 10 out of 10, like a masterpiece, because it would have been so easy to do, because the recipe was here for success, but I feel like they kind of fell over and tripped on themselves. And I feel like this leads into a big issue that I feel like MAPPA is going to continue to run into, is that it's clear that people love their works because, obviously, they're flashy. MAPPA is a very flashy studio. The people that work on their shows like JJK and Chainsaw Man and stuff, they make absolutely flashy sequences that trend and everybody talk about. Hell, you go to social media, you'll see everybody is now talking about JJK, it's trending worldwide, and you'll see people talking about beautiful sequences like this right here, which I'm going to actually show, like the Naoya stuff when he's fighting Maki. There's just a lot of good stuff within this episode, and I can definitely see why people want to talk about it. But I feel like in general, people are not understanding the real criticisms here of why why the Japanese community doesn't like this. Now, I have seen similar complaints from the Japanese community that was labeled against Chainsaw Man, which is ironic because Chainsaw Man wasn't liked by the Japanese audience as well, like Season 1, to be completely honest. And the reason for that was because Chainsaw Man Season 1 was directed very differently. The director decided to do more of a realistic approach with its art and animation. It looked just immersive and realistic. It looked like actual people moving around. And in this episode, there is definitely a lot of tones and vibes that give off that feeling of, like, realism. There is a lot of movement here that feels that type of way. And I could see that a lot of what Chainsaw Man Season 1 did with its realistic movement is definitely implemented in this episode of JJK. And so I have seen complaints from the Japanese community that have complained about Season 1 of Chainsaw Man not liking this, episode because of the directing of the look and the animation looking way too much like a live-action movie than actually what anime is normally like within Japan. Now, once again, that's up to personal preference if you disagree with that or not. But I do think that it is interesting to see the complaints from the Japanese community, especially when MAPPA now is trying to focus heavily on a global audience instead of Japan-first approach. So yeah, this is more or less a sneak peek of just how they are focusing on widespread appeal than actually trying to cater to why it became popular, in this case the Japanese audience, that allowed the manga to even blow up to begin with. Because obviously, if the Japanese community wasn't supporting JJK at the start within Weekly Shonen Jump, it would have been canceled, and then that means that we never would have gotten an anime. So there's a lot of ways to really look at this, but the point of the matter is that I do think that the episode is overliked and overhated, but I feel like, there's an understandable amount of criticism here. So overall, to get to the main point, I think that in general, the art and animation was the main point and focus, and everything else more or less took a sidestep. They were not as important for anything else, which is legitimately sad because that's not the point of anime. Anime, yes, can have gorgeous art and animation for fights, but if you sacrifice the story, then I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. Because as much as people like to meme on, JJK and say the story is not that good, and yeah, it's not perfect, there is still some good themes and elements here, and the Maki and Mai stuff is a pretty good highlight. It's a really good theme within the story that fits everything, and I feel like, yeah, this is definitely one of the weaker episodes MAPPA has personally worked on. I'll leave it at that, though. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. It does help me out a lot. Chibi out.